You've got no free will, and I'll try to let you understand. You see, the debate on free will is one that has been in the heart of philosophy forever, all right? And there's always been that divide between people and academia on whether we have it or not. Do we or do we not have free will? And it's so complex a topic because on the one hand, it feels so real. Because what's free will to begin with? Free will is the notion, is the idea that you are in control of your life, all right? That the outcome of your life is as a result of the choices you make. In other words, you are in charge of your life. Or better still, you are writing the story of your life as you go along. Whereas the antithesis of that would be fate or destiny or determinism, if you will, which is the idea that no, you're not quite in control of your life. That in a sense, the story of your life has already been scripted. And all you do is act out the script day by day as you live by. So it becomes very, very difficult to convince the people that they got no free will. Why? Because the choices these people make feel so real. They can tell you for a fact that they are in this or that career path simply by way of their choices. Or that they got married to this specific person based on their own volition, based on their own free will, based on their own very choice. But here I am to bust your bubble and tell you no, I'm sorry, you didn't quite make these choices. Even though they felt so real. Even though they felt so real, like you made them. In the bigger picture, you will realize it's all an illusion. It feels so real, yet it ain't real. Pretty much like a magician on stage who does all this magic. He conjures stuff out of thin air, all right? Until you get to pull the curtains from behind and then you realize it's nothing but a bunch of tricks. It's nothing but a mirage. It's nothing but a semblance of what free will is supposed to be. It's not actually what you think it is. And so going forward, I'll try to convince you that you got no free will. And to do that, I figured I'd use an analogy. At this point in time, I'd like for you to imagine being invited to a party, all right? And you being a good friend, you show up, you respect the invitation and you show up to this party. And upon arrival to the party, you're ushered to a specific table in the hall. And for the sake of convenience, let's say there are 10 tables and you're ushered to table number 4, for example. You're ushered to table number 4. Nothing special about it, number 4. It's just a number. It could be table number 1, number 2, number 7, or whatever. But you're ushered to table number 4. So time goes by and eventually the formalities of the party are done with and it's time for a feast. It's time for food. So at this point in time, your table is served a menu, all right? You're served a menu with, let's say, 10 options to pick from, okay? You go through the 10 options and you settle for, let's say you settle for 2 items, 2, 3 items on the menu. And so eventually you get served your food and there you are basically having the time of your life. You're having a good time. And at this point in time, I pose the question, who actually made the choice of what you're currently eating? Yourself or the event planner? Well, before you answer the question, bear in mind 2 things. 1, that you went through the 10 options and you picked 2 out of, okay? That's fine. We're good on that. But also make the consideration that, well, you were served a menu completely independent of your choice or will. That's to say, you were never a partaker as to the planning of this occasion. And so you had absolutely no idea what would be served. But then you got served a menu and you made your choices. So again, I ask you the question, who do you really think made the choice of what you're currently eating? Yourself or the event planner? And of course, your answer is, I did. I made the choice. And to some degree, quite frankly, in your mind, the question feels a little bit moronic because you can tell for a fact that you made your choice. You went through the options and you chose 2 or 3 items out of the 10 options. I respect your opinion, and let's ride on. So you basically just go on enjoying your food, all right? You're having a really good time, just enjoying the food and having a really good time. Until at some point in time, you decide to look around the hall just to make sure that everyone else was as happy as you are, was having the time of their lives like yourself, all right? And at this point in time, you make a stunning realization. You realize that the different tables in the hall all seem to have different dishes from what you got served on your table. And in fact, that's what happened. You see, it turns out that every single table in the hall was served a uniquely different menu from the other. And now you're beginning to give it a more deeper thought. Because what's the implication of what you just realized? The implication is that, well, there weren't just 10 options to choose from, right? There were actually 100 different options in the pool of possibilities as to what could be eaten. But you were only confined by no choice of your own to 10 options when you got ushered to table number 4. And at this point in time, I pop up again with the same old question. Who do you think made the choice of what you're currently eating? Yourself or the event planner? And at this point in time, I realize you're not so quick in giving an answer like you did when I first posed the question, because now you're feeling a little bit uneasy, because it dawns on you that, well, maybe, just maybe, you might have been eating something else, just if you had been ushered to some other table. And so you're visibly perplexed and a little bit lackadaisical in giving an answer. But that's all right. That's all right. It gets better. We go further. So in your confusion, you decide, well, it's about time you perhaps visited John and ease yourself. And so you wake up from your table and you're trying to find the restrooms. And as you open this door, hopefully to find the hallway leading you to the restroom, you make yet another stunning realization. You realize, well, it's not just one hall. It's a multitude of halls. You got all these doors leading to separate halls filled with people. So for the sake of convenience, let's say there are 100 different halls filled with people. And that would mean it's not just 100 people. It's thousands of people now. You're flustered. You're taken aback. And you're curious. And so you peep through these doors, a couple of them, and then you come to yet another remarkable realization. You realize that the many hundreds of tables in all these many halls were served uniquely different menus from each other. So at this point in time, you come to the realization that, well, you didn't quite have free will. And I'll explain. Because you suddenly realize that, well, you are confined to table number 4, even though there were millions of options out there. And the interesting thing about this part is that you couldn't possibly change your tables. You couldn't decide, well, I want to move from table number 4 to table number 7. Or that I want to go across to some other hall out there. I want to go to hall number 48 and be at table number 172. No, you couldn't possibly make that choice. And right there, you come to the realization that, well, you weren't quite free in the decision you made. Because what does it mean to be free? Freedom is basically determined by how much options you have. The more options you have, the freer you are. The less options you have, the less free you are. And that's why we consider prisoners as people without freedom. What do we say when someone is put to jail or sent to prison? We say this person has been stripped of their freedom. Is that to say they've got absolutely no freedom at all? No, come on. They got some degree of freedom. In the prison cell, for example, they get to choose if they want to play basketball or they want to do bench presses. The thing is, their pool of options is so limited, all right, compared to the free man. So we say they ain't got no freedom, but in effect, they do make choices, limited choices, yet they're not free. And if we were to have any allegiance to reason, we would at this point in time be able to say that you have got as much free will as a prisoner has got freedom. And so at this point in time, I'd like to submit to you that, well, you didn't quite exercise any free will when you ate whatever you ate at the party. It was never your choice. It was the choice of the event planner. How? Because I do believe that the only way you could have exercised free will would be that you showed up to this party, ushered yourself in, were aware of all the variables, all the possibilities of all the halls in there, and you make the choice. Let's call it the first choice. You made the very big first choice that I would sit on table number X, Y, or Z. If you did that and ate whatever was served on that table, then I would say you exercise free will. But with what we just explained, but with the conditions of the party we just talked about, I wouldn't say you exercise on a free will. And now, let's liken that to daily life. You see, being born is like showing up to that party. In that you are born into a prison system. You're born basically into table number 4. And you're not responsible for what I just called a while back, the first choice. You're not responsible for that. So you're born into this prison system. Well, Jean-Jacques Rousseau said, man is born free, and everywhere he goes he's in chains. If I were to apply that into the free will discussion, I would say man is born unfree, and everywhere he goes he's in chains. Born unfree because you are born into a prison system. You're born confined to table number 4 per se, with very, very limited options, and you cannot change table number 4. And you get to walk through life being able to navigate within a very, very narrow corridor. Pretty much like the prisoners we talked about a while ago. You get to make very, very limited choices. But in effect, when you realize how confined, how little of the choices you really can make, then you realize you do not quite have free will. In effect, it is an illusion. Free will is an illusion. You're born into a family, a culture, a language, a skin tone, a skin complexion that was never your choice. But all these things determine the rest of your life. They determine everything about your life. Your parents, your sisters, your siblings, they determine everything for the rest of your life. And remember, it was never your choice. Never your choice to begin with. The only way for you to actually say you got free will would be, in real life, would be that you made the first choice. You made what I've come to call the first choice. Remember what I've come to call the first choice? That you made that choice. That you chose your family and your siblings and your language and your financial status and your skin complexion and all those things. If you made these choices, if you could prove that you made these choices, the family into which you were born, if you could prove that you made these choices, I would go with you to say, well, you got free will, of course. But of course you cannot do that. That's an impossibility. You cannot prove to me that you made these choices. You didn't make them, you know? You just showed up. And to think you got free will when you didn't make this first choice would mean to make nonsense of the standard rule of cause and effect, that every stage of our life is determined by the previous. From cradle to grave, every step of our life is determined by the previous. It's determined by a preceding stage. And that would mean that if you didn't make the first choice, then the snowball effect down the course of your life cannot be of your choice. And how about we just do a much more realistic analysis by analyzing a real life situation, probably an individual who we all can relate to. So let's take the case of someone like Elon Musk, for example, world's richest man of our time, all right? And we ask the question, why is he so successful? Or better still, how did he become the world's richest man? All right? And we get answers from two camps. So you get the people on this side who believe in free will, who will come up to tell you, well, it's all by the choices he made. It was all free will. And then you get those on the other side who tell you, no, he was fated for that. He was destined for that. All right? Everything had been set up. He was ushered to a table that set him up for that. And all we got to do is ask them, all right, so but make your arguments. And what are the arguments? This side goes, well, he's been a hardworking man all his life. He studied so hard from the very beginning. He was writing code from the age of 7. By the time he was 15, he had already read more than 1,000 books. He outsmarted his class teachers and he was reading encyclopedias, right? Probably they go on to say in his later days, he's been a hard worker. He even sleeps on the floor at Tesla, all right? So to make all these arguments, let's say he studied really hard, he works hard, and he took risks, okay? Let's say those are some of the 3 key factors that make to account for the outcome of his life, all right? Good. And the other side, what argument do they make? They say, well, he was born with the genes. He was born with the IQ, with an exceptionally high IQ. He was born into a capable white family. So you get these arguments and you sitting on the fence as a judge. Your role is to find credibility on what side? What side of the arguments actually holds water? Where do you find much more credibility, all right? And there is a test, there is a simple test you can do to find out which of the arguments, which team has got a much more credible argument. And the test goes like this. All you need to do is to go into the points they made, all right? And make little tiny changes, little teeny tiny changes into all the variables are put forth and try to see how much it affects the outcome of Elon's life, all right? So let's say, first we'll get into team A, the free will believers, and we say, all right, every other variable stays constant, but we make a little shift in one. Let's say, instead of him studying so hard across countries and across continents, all he really did was study in one university and had, let's say, a bachelor's in science, or probably just a high school diploma, okay? Let's say we make that little change and we keep all the other variables constant, that little change. And you ask yourself the question, how much do you think that would have made an effect as to the outcome of his life or what he would become? And I would tell you for a fact, not much. Why? Because with the genes, He could have taught himself anyways. He could have taught himself anyways. Remember, there's someone who outsmarted his teachers at an early age. I watched an interview where he said he was enrolled into some computer classes at the age of maybe 10 or something. He went there, but he wasn't impressed because he was smarter than the teacher. He outclassed the teacher. He felt like teaching the teacher, all right? He didn't need them. So if this guy hadn't had the kind of education he had, believe you me, he would still be where he is as the world's richest man, or at least one of them. But now let's go over to the other side and make a little change, all right? Let's go to all the arguments they made. Genetics, background, family background, support from family, a supportive environment, and all that. And let's make a little tiny change on any of those variables put forward. Let's say instead of him being born in the household in which he was born in another household. And let's not say he was born in some other country. Let's not say he was born in Iraq. Let's not go too far. Let's simply say, well, instead of being born in this family at this time, this white family at this time, all right, in apartheid South Africa, he was rather born right across the street into a black family. Remember, this is apartheid era South Africa. And we find out how much of a change that will make as to the outcome of his life. Or we could go for his IQ. Let's say every other thing stayed the same, but we made a simple change that instead of being born with the very high IQ he was born with, he was rather born just a little tiny inch under, all right? Just below, which takes him probably from the state of a prodigy to that of a very, very smart kid. So it leaves him with a very, very smart man still, all right? But he's not at the level of intelligence where he was born at. And let's see how that affects his life. Or we could go for his sex. Every other variable remaining constant, except he was born a woman and probably had to be called Elena Musk, okay? And we find out how this would have affected the course of his life. And at this point in time, brothers and sisters, friends and comrades, I dare submit to you that unlike on this side of the aisle, where you could make little changes and have a very little effect, with even the slightest changes on this other side, on the things he couldn't control, on the things that are completely independent of his choice, with the slightest change in any of those variables, believe you me, Elon would be in a completely different destination. And that I believe we all can accept for a fact. And then, with all these considered, I ask you the question again. We go back to the question. Who, in your opinion, at this point in time, would you really say made the decision of what you ate at a party? You or the event planner?